This is the only parliament the world's ever invented where you cannot initiate legislation, propose legislation, or even the repeal of legislation. All of that comes from the unelected European Commission.
So you can't propose a law and try and get it passed?
No, absolutely not. Parliamentary democracy, once every 5 years, you can throw everything out of the window and start again. With this, once something is European law, there is nothing through a democratic process the voter can do to change it.
The people whom we elect to go to Brussels have almost no power at all. They do what they're told.
Got even less power than the House of Lords, for goodness sake.
Our votes for these people are pointless. They are fundamentally pointless.
The European Parliament is an irrelevance. The European Union bureaucratic structures, who are appointed, not elected, have all the real power.
The real power in the EU, including the power to legislate, resides not with the Parliament, but with EU officials. They debate their laws in secret. We are not allowed to hear or read their deliberations. The history of democracy in Britain has been the history of taxpayers demanding the right to determine themselves how much tax should be taken from them and how it should be spent.
If I'm going to be asked to pay taxes, I want to be told where they're going, and if they're spent badly or stupidly, I want to be able to remove from power the people who are spending them.
What made Britain rather different from most other countries was that at an early stage we said no government could pass any law or impose any tax without first getting the authority of the British people. So it's a major thing that we can be taxed by other people without our say.
We are now subjects of a vastly complex state machine run by anonymous officials whom we didn't elect, but who have the power to impose on us laws that we haven't debated and have no democratic means of repealing.
People who say to you that the European Union is undemocratic fundamentally misunderstand the European Union. It is anti-democratic.
But to EU officials and politicians, it's like a warm bath.
It's like heaven for the politician or bureaucrat because it's power without accountability.
The reason why all the major political parties are massively in favour of Europe is because when their careers are blown out of the water here, they're stumbling around for a job. No commercial organisation is going to hire them. They know what a collection of shits they are, right? There's only one place that will hire them.
They can get a job there, which gives them the freedom not to have to face the electorate.
It's extremely well paid, it's more or less permanent, they don't have any constituents and they don't have any worry about being thrown out at elections.
So they say, stay with the European project, I'll be making myself 200-300 grand a year. It'll be fantastic, and at the end of it I'll get a peerage. It's great.
Since they're not directly accountable to the tax-paying public, EU politicians and bureaucrats have understandably been more than generous to themselves in pay and perks.
Why would they not want to stay here, living a life of luxury?
There are a number of people here who are paid more than the British Prime Minister. Oh, you might say, but how many? 4, 10, 100? 10,000. There are 10,000 people here paid more than David Cameron. That's 1 in 5 of everyone who works for the EU. If you're an EU official, there's the relocation allowance, the household allowance, the family allowance, the entertainment allowance, the private healthcare allowance, the private education for your kids allowance. The healthcare allowance includes free Viagra. You would have thought that would come under entertainment. If you're an MEP, you get an extra £250 a day for being good enough to turn up, another £41,000 a year on top of that to cover phone bills and computers, and another £225,000 a year on top of that to cover staffing costs, which in years gone by often meant spouse or children. And to cap it all, they've decided to charge themselves a special low rate of tax. But it's not just the officials and politicians who benefit. The EU diverts great rivers of taxpayers' cash to the tax-consuming middle-class intelligentsia in our sprawling, publicly funded establishment.
The European Union is very good at purchasing the loyalty of powerful and articulate interests in all the member states.
When we hear great public institutions, quangos, museums and campaign groups, waxing lyrical about the EU, we have to remember the EU gives them vast amounts of our money.
The EU gives shed loads of our money to local authorities and to universities and to art groups and opera companies.
And that then provides this chorus of noise in favour of the European project.
Every charity over a certain size is getting money from Brussels. Every NGO.
We see EU largesse effectively buying opinion.
You know, what we see here is really a racket. It's become a very good way of taking money from the general population and handing it to people who are lucky enough to be working for the system.
The EU pays fishermen to leave an industry and destroy their boats.
Oh, that's right.
While at the same time giving rights to people elsewhere to fish the same waters.
Oh, that's right,
For the fishermen here, being in the EU does not mean that Britain has greater influence over European affairs. It means Europe has taken control of our affairs. We have not gained power, we've lost it.
For the last couple of decades, Britain has voted against 72 measures in the European Council and been defeated 72 times.
How will you be voting in the referendum?
Oh, definitely out. Definitely out. I've known that as soon as I ever got the chance, I'd vote out.
For many in Britain, the EU sticks in the craw. EU regulation seems absurd and intrusive. We don't like being bossed around by a bunch of bureaucrats. For the British, it seems to go against the grain.
There's a huge cultural difference. I've seen it for myself when I was in government, when I went to meetings of the Council of Ministers. They thought I came from another planet.
There is still in many parts of the continent a notion that the way that society should be organised is to have a class of wise, experienced, public-spirited experts who will run things in the best interests of all. The British historically have been deeply sceptical of this kind of approach.
Britain, I think, does stand out within Europe, and one of the odd things is why they want to keep us in the club, given that they're always complaining about us.
Why are British the cussed ones in Europe? Why are we so attached to our independence and freedom? Why do we take so badly to regulation? Where does it all come from?
We need to regain the right for British people to make British laws.
If people believe that the best way to strengthen the United Kingdom is to hand over every year more money and more power to an unaccountable bureaucratic elite in Brussels, then what they should do is campaign to stay in the European Union.
It comes down to the essential issue, the working man and woman of this country against people who think we have a better plan and a better mind than you. And if you don't like it, what are you going to do? And the answer is, we're going to vote leave. So...
There are a number of issues where I believe that we should be leaving.
This is people versus the establishment, people versus the elite. I just hope that the mass of people who may not go around being interviewed much, may never get a look in on any of the media or television, come June the 23rd, will be out there saying, this is our chance to get our own back.
Give us back control of our own country.
With general elections, it doesn't really matter who you vote for, Conservative or Labour, because you know that in 4 years' time, you can change your mind. This time you can't change your mind. This time is for keeps.
This referendum is the most important political act that has happened in my lifetime. This is about our future, our freedom, our democracy, our right to govern ourselves.
What really matters is that you should have the power to remove the people who govern you.
The reason why the suffragettes went to all that trouble to get the vote was because they wanted to, they themselves, be treated as grown-ups and decide their own destiny.
If I was told I would be stewing grass to feed my family in 5 years' time, if we left the European Union, I would still do it.
It's time to regain our freedom and independence, the right to decide ourselves how we live our lives.
There's a lot at stake here. What we want is democracy. We, the people, should determine our own destiny. We have the capacity to shape our own futures. So my question is, what price freedom?
Well, thank you, Mr. Schultz. Isn't it funny? You know, when I came here 17 years ago, and I said that I wanted to lead a campaign to get Britain to leave the European Union, you all laughed at me. Well, I have to say, you're not laughing now, are you? And the reason you're so upset, the reason you're so angry, has been perfectly clear from all the angry exchanges this morning. You, as a political project, are in denial. And the main reason the United Kingdom voted the way that it did is you have, by stealth, by deception, without ever telling the truth to the British or the rest of the peoples of Europe, you have imposed upon them a political union. You've imposed upon them a political union. And when the people in 2005 in the Netherlands and France voted against that political union, when they rejected the Constitution, you simply ignored them and brought the Lisbon Treaty in through the back door. Now I know that virtually none of you have ever done a proper job in your lives, or worked in business, or worked in trade, or indeed ever created a job. But listen, just listen.
Herr Farage.
We, between us, between your countries and my country, we do an enormous amount of business in goods and services. That trade is mutually beneficial to both of us. That trade matters. If you were to decide to cut off your noses, to spite your faces, and to reject any idea of a sensible trade deal, the consequences would be far worse for you than it would be for us. And even no deal is better for the United Kingdom than the current rotten deal that we've got. But let's cut between us a sensible tariff-free deal, and thereafter recognise that the United Kingdom will be your friend, that we will trade with you, we will cooperate with you, we will be your best friends in the world. But do that, do it sensibly, and allow us to go off and pursue our global ambitions and future. Thank you. You have the charisma of a damp rag and the appearance of a low-grade bank clerk. And the question that I want to ask, that we're all going to ask, is who are you? I'd never heard of you. Nobody in Europe had ever heard of you. I would like to ask you, President, who voted for you? And what mechanism? Oh, I know democracy is not popular with you lot. And what mechanism do the peoples of Europe have to remove you? Is this European democracy? Well, I sense though that you're competent and capable and dangerous, and I have no doubt that it's your intention to be the quiet assassin of European democracy and of the European nation states. You appear to have a loathing for the very concept of the existence of nation states. Perhaps that's because you come from Belgium, which of course is pretty much a non-country. But since you took over, we've seen Greece reduced to nothing more than a protectorate. Sir, you have no legitimacy in this job at all, and I can say with confidence that I can speak on behalf of the majority of the British people in saying we don't know you, we don't want you, and the sooner you're put out to grass, the better.